billionaire CEO shocked everyone. He stood up for the cleaning lady and her boy. A janitor's son turned $1 million boardroom into his canvas. Everyone expected fury. But the CEO, he smiled. That smile would change a woman's life. From a mop to a manager's desk, Elena thought she had found dignity again. But under glittering chandeliers, humiliation cut deep. And when diamonds appeared in her locker, her world collapsed. They called her a thief. Even he turned away. Yet 5 nights later, the truth erupted. Before the press, the powerful CEO shattered an empire and an engagement. Isabella framed an innocent woman. The world gasped. Elena wept. This was more than justice. It was redemption, born from crayons and courage. And it all began with a child's drawing. Madrid was still half asleep. Beyond the window, the city lay hidden in a cold morning fog. The clock struck 4, and in a cramped, aging apartment tucked inside a poor neighborhood, a woman awoke. Elena Ramirez pushed herself up from the creaking bed. The springs whined beneath her, blending with a weary sigh. The thin blanket could no longer keep her warm. Her shoulders ached from the cold. But there was no other choice. For a long time now, a full night's sleep had been a luxury she could not afford. The tiny room was barely 10 square meters, cluttered with a small bed, a worn wardrobe, and a patched wooden table full of cracks. Every corner carried a faint smell of dampness. From the hallway outside, the wind whistled through the gaps in the door, mingling with the faraway murmur of the city. Madrid had not yet awakened, but Elena had to. She slipped into an old sweater, its threads thinning with age, and stepped into the small kitchen corner. Her rough hands flicked on the dim yellow light. A battered kettle rattled on the stove. Beside it sat the lunchbox she had packed the night before: cold rice, a fried egg, a few slices of tomato. Enough to keep her stomach quiet through the endless night shift. Opening the shaky wooden cabinet, Elena reached for a faded metal tin. She placed her lunch inside, careful, almost reverent, as if she were tucking away the last fragile hope of her day. Her eyes drifted unbidden toward an old photograph on the wall. Inside a cracked glass frame, 3 smiling faces gleamed with joy: Elena, her husband Miguel, and little Mateo, just learning to walk. That smile was now only a memory. 3 years ago, an accident had taken Miguel away, leaving Elena to shoulder the weight of the world alone. Her fingers brushed the glass. Longing surged, but the tears were gone. Life had carved a hard shell around her heart. Crying never paid the bills. Crying never filled her son's stomach. Elena, keep going, she whispered to herself, then turned back to her routine. In the next room, Mateo was still asleep. The 6-year-old boy lay curled beneath a thin blanket, his lashes fluttering as if caught in a dream. Elena sat beside him, stroking his soft hair, a tenderness blooming in her chest, tinged with pain. Mateo was the only reason she could go on. No matter how exhausted she felt, his laughter gave her strength to live another day. Suddenly the phone rang, shattering the fragile calm. Elena grabbed it quickly, only to hear the raspy voice of the babysitter. "Elena, I'm sorry. I'm very sick today. I can't watch Mateo." Her body went rigid. Her trembling hand clutched the phone tighter. Questions stormed through her mind. Who would watch him? Who could she ask for help? But here in Madrid, she had no family left. And her friends, each was fighting their own battles for survival. A chill ran down her spine. If she skipped work, she would almost certainly lose her job. This job, though meager, though filled with disdain, was the only thin rope keeping her and her boy from falling into the abyss. Elena set the phone down and took a deep breath. She bent over Mateo's bed and gently shook his shoulder. "My son, today you'll have to come with me to work." Mateo's wide eyes blinked open. He rubbed them, yawned, and suddenly a spark of excitement lit his face. "Mama, can I bring my crayons?" he asked, voice bright with hope. Elena's lips curved into a faint smile, though her chest tightened. "Yes, but you must promise me something. You'll sit quietly in one place. No running around. Understand?" Mateo raised his small hand like a soldier. "I promise." Elena gazed at him, her heart caught between love and fear. She could never imagine that this innocent promise would open a brand new chapter in her life, one where motherhood, justice, and even love would collide, challenge, and heal. Chapter 1. A Boy in the Boardroom. The marble corridors of Cortes and Asociados echoed with hollow sounds like the measured taps of an invisible conductor. A ribbon of cold ceiling light trailed above, mirroring Elena's small figure as she slipped along with her cleaning cart. Her hands familiar with bleach and the smell of metal guided the mop in silence, afraid to wake a world sleeping behind walls of rare wood. In the far corner, the heavy door to the staff lounge sat ajar. Inside, Mateo perched on a tired old sofa, his dangling feet not quite touching the floor, a stack of blank paper and a box of crayons, every color spread out before him. "Remember what I told you," Elena whispered again. "You sit here and draw, and wait for me to come back." Mateo nodded hard, his messy black hair bouncing. "I promise," he said, prying open the crayon box with both hands, eyes shining as if he'd just discovered treasure. Elena pulled the door to though her heart stayed in the little room. She knew her boy was good, and she also knew curiosity hid in the corners of those clear eyes. She rolled the cart into the hall, starting at the baseboard, where dust gathered in a dark seam. Chlorine cleaner drifted outward, blending with the glossy wood smell she always called the deck her name for the boardroom scent, because the floor stretched wide and gleaming like the deck of a great ship. At the end of the hall, a clock ticked steady as the building's breath. Her phone buzzed softly in her pocket, reminding her to move to the next zone. Elena picked up the pace. In her head was a list that looped like a familiar score mop. Hall A, polish the stair rail, change the pantry trash check, the tempered glass at the entrance. Each task paired itself with a picture. Mateo sleeping in the lounge, the bowl of hot soup she'd warm when they got home. These small things had carried her back through a long, hard winter. A minute, then 2, then 5. Elena was just bending at the stairs when she heard something off, soft but sharp, the little snap of a latch like a small bird striking a frame. She stilled. Not the wind. A stretched-out silence followed, then the patter of footsteps, tiny and quick, like rain racing across a tin roof. "Mateo," she called, her throat suddenly dry. No answer. She left the cart and ran toward the lounge. The door was cracked open. On the sofa, the crayon box lay on its side lid still off. The first sheet bore a half-finished flower. But Mateo was gone. A chill curled up the back of her neck. "Mateo." Her voice rolled down the corridor, bounced off the wooden panels, and fell away like a sigh. She stopped and listened. Then clear as a small brass bell laughter. Not far, high and bright, an innocent, glancing off polished surfaces and springing back once more. That laughter pulled her forward like a thread. She hurried past the oil portraits of founding partners, past the glass shelves of legal awards, and came to the massive mahogany doors, carved with reliefs, boardroom. The words struck her chest off limits. The rules aligned in red ink in the employee handbook were clear: no children in meeting areas during work hours. Elena had read it and kept it like scripture. She had never pushed this door except during scheduled cleaning and always with a supervisor. But the laughter sounded again just behind the door, along with the shuffle of paper and, oh, a long delighted ooh. Elena held her breath. She wrapped her fingers around the cold metal handle and pushed. The scene burst like a frozen frame coming to life. A long mahogany table polished to a mirror ran the length of the room, flanked by rows of deep black leather chairs. Under the cold white lights, thick binders and leather folios lay open, like whales surfacing for air. Across the tabletop and the stone floor, contract printouts lay scattered like snow, streaked with crayon red flowers, a yellow sun, a house with a green triangle roof, shaky five-pointed stars. Right in the center, on the oversized chairman's seat, Matteo sat cross-legged, head tilted, red crayon in hand, cheeks flushed with excitement, legs swinging. In front of him, a contract page was filled with petals. Matteo, Elena gasped, her voice cracking. Every head turned. She had never seen so many people in here. A line of international partners, men in dark suits, with stiff collars and tight ties, women with professional eyes, and notebooks ready, stared. A couple of assistants hugged their laptops in the corners, eyes wide with horror. The air thickened. Elena took a step, then stopped, her hands lifting instinctively as if to spread a blanket over a storm. "Honey, come down," she whispered, her voice shaking. Matteo looked up, his smile warm as lamplight. "Mama, I'm drawing flowers for you." He turned toward the head of the table where a man stood. "Do you like flowers, mister?" Elena didn't need an introduction. She'd seen that man on magazine covers at the newsstand, on a muted TV at the public clinic, and sometimes on her co-workers' phones. Daniel Cortez, the youngest managing partner in the firm's history. In photos, he always wore eyes like thin ice, beautiful cold, reflecting everything and holding nothing. Now, he stood at the end of the table, one hand braced on the wood, the other relaxed at his side, tall and still like a lamppost in a storm. His face was so even, Elna couldn't read a single word of feeling there. Her throat pinched. It's over, she thought. Not just the job. Everything, the sliver of dignity, the fragile walls she'd built around her son. "This child is one partner," began in a Nordic accent, cut off by a sharp rustle as someone scooped papers from the floor. Another let out a long, irritated breath. "This is Yoon." Elena lowered her head, the apology stuck behind her tongue. She hurried around the table, ready to lift Matteo down, knowing every stare would pierce her back. But the boy had already turned to Daniel, eyes wide with unguarded trust. "Look," Matteo said, offering the contract page. "These are my flowers." For a moment, time drew tight. Elena watched Daniel reach out unhurried and take the page the crayon butterflies had claimed. She held her breath until her chest hurt, waiting for the storm. It didn't come. Instead, something small and soft as down happened. The line of his mouth flickered. A hairline crack ran across the ice, a slight lift at the corner. Not a smirk, not politeness, a real smile, the kind so rare in a boardroom that as soon as it appears, it makes everyone feel oddly exposed, like hearing a stranger call their name. "Beautiful," he said, voice low and warm, drawn from a place he didn't often use. "It's been a long time since I've seen a flower I'd remember." The whispers cut off. Elena blinked, certain she'd misheard. A senior partner across the table cleared his throat, bracing for the usual response: reprimand, removal, a call to security. None of it came. Only that strange quiet in which Elena could hear her own breath, like water pressing through a narrow pipe. Matteo glowed. "Can I draw more?" "Matteo?" Elena breathed, finding her voice at last. "Come down to Mama. Now." The boy hesitated, looking from his mother to Daniel. No one had ever told him that a room like this, with a table as long as a ship of rules and rows of tie-wearing adults, didn't accept crayons. He only saw wide, empty space and endless white paper, and he saw that smile like a door opened a crack with no "do not enter" sign. Daniel tipped his chin, a signal meant for Elena, not the boy. It said, "It's all right. Let me handle it." He set the paper down, lifted his eyes to the child, then to the mother. "What's your name?" he asked, gentle, as if speaking to the boy he himself once was. Matteo sat up straight, proud. "Matteo." "Matteo," Daniel echoed, weighing each syllable. "And your mother?" He turned to Elena. "What's her name?" "Elena," she answered barely above a breath. "Elena," he repeated, and she had the strange feeling her own name had tilted into something new. "I'm Daniel, and this is a rather important meeting." He smiled again, another line of light across the ice. One of the senior attorneys lunged in, voice rough. "Mr. Cortez, perhaps we should—" Daniel lifted a hand, courteous but firm. 5-minute break, he said to no one in particular, and everyone understood. Air. Coffee. The short words landed like a Marine's orders. A beat of surprise. Then chairs moved. The heavy thud of leather soles crossed marble. The suited figures filed out as if they'd been granted permission to breathe. When the door latched, only 3 remained. Elena, at the edge of the table, fingers knit so tight they blanched. Matteo in the chairman's seat legs swinging, and Daniel standing like an axis. Elena gathered her courage. I'm so sorry, sir." She began, words spilling like water from a burst seam. "I told my son to stay in the lounge, but my babysitter is sick. I had no one to watch him." And she swallowed. "I know this room is off limits. Please believe me, this will never happen again. I'll accept full responsibility, and if the firm fire you," Daniel finished. Not sharp, just naming a possibility. Elena bit her lip. She'd heard the word ringing in her head since the door swung open. Her child, his crayons, those reckless flowers of childhood, they'd all turned into a cold blade. Daniel regarded the contract for another beat. Uneven petals, some spilling over tiny legal clauses, some overlapping numbers like mountain ranges. He set the page down and moved closer, stopping short of crowding the boy's air. "You drew these for your mother?" he asked. "Yes," Matteo said eagerly. "She works so hard. I draw flowers so she won't be tired." A smile flickered across Daniel's eyes before he could stop it. Elena saw it, and to her confusion, it made her heart ache in a strange way, like a shaft of sun finding a window long shut. He turned to Elena. "Your son is brave," he said, "and generous." "He's just a child," Elena murmured. "I'm sorry he made the boardroom less frightening." Daniel tilted his head as if testing a small private joke. Then he exhaled and the sound was deeply human. Elena, could you take Mateo back to the lounge for a moment? I'll have someone send down some warm milk. And he paused, as if wary of saying too much too quickly. If you don't mind, when you finish this hallway, meet me in the private library. There are a few things I'd like to ask. Elena froze. The private library, a place she'd only glimpsed through a closed pane of glass. Inside, her warning lights blinked powerful man, private invitation consequences you can't predict. But the words warm milk struck her heart with a gentle beat. Who even thinks of warm milk in a room ruled by cold numbers? Yes, she said softly. Thank you. Mateo had slid off the chair, still clutching his crayon. He scurried around the table and stopped in front of Daniel. His small hand lifted as if sharing a secret. You keep this, he said, pressing the red crayon into Daniel's palm. When you're scared, draw a flower. The room paused again. Daniel looked at the crayon cheap, dulled at the tip, a peeling paper label along the side. He closed his long fingers around it, as if trying to remember how to hold something that wasn't a silver fountain pen or a deal-signing pen. I'll keep it, he said very slowly. Elena tugged her boy's hand. Thank you, Mr. Cortez, she said, eager to end the moment before it turned a page she wasn't ready to read. She stooped to gather the scattered sheets, gently sweeping up the flowers as if lifting leaves from the middle of a busy road. At the door, something tugged at her. She looked back. Daniel still stood there, the red crayon in his hand, the white light laying over his shoulders in a way that could be mistaken for armor. He no longer looked like the man in the glossy photos. For a breath, Elena thought she saw a boy inside him, a boy kept too long in a suit. The door closed. The corridor was empty. Elena led Mateo to the lounge, her heart pounding like a drummer warming up before a concert. She sat on the sofa's edge and hugged him tight, catching the warm scent of his hair, the wax on his sleeve. You scared me to death, she whispered, voice rough, unable to stop the helpless smile. I'm sorry, Mateo said, rolling his eyes up at her. But he smiled, Mama. Didn't you see grown-ups here never smile like that? Elena shut her eyes. She'd seen it too. And that was what unsettled her. A smile in a boardroom could be a blessing or a sugar trap. The years had taught her don't hand your hope over easily. But Daniel's hand around that crayon, such a small, gentle thing, had nudged the heavy door of her caution. She smoothed Mateo's hair, set him up with a fresh stack of paper, and slipped back into the hallway to the mop and the checklist that had to be finished before dawn. The floor mirrored her as the mop drew long arcs like a water path leading somewhere she didn't dare to name. At the end of the corridor, the clock ticked a few more rounds. Each tick tapped against her breastbone. The library. After. Back at reception, Elena caught the night shift receptionist Lucia, lifting a brow with meaning. You okay? Lucia asked, then lowered her voice further. He didn't get angry. Elena shook her head, feeling like she was telling a fairy tale. No. Weird. Lucia murmured, half smile, half worry. Be careful. Private meetings. They usually mean something. She dragged out the last word. Elena gave a thin smile. I can take care of myself. But as she turned away, her heart fluttered, not with fear, but with something harder to name, curiosity. She worked her way down the corridor, swapping trash liners, wiping a coffee spill near the vending machine. With each finished task, she told herself the line that kept her steady. I'm doing this for Mateo. At the final item, she washed her hands in the staff restroom, stared at her cracked fingertips, and thought about the cheap hand cream she kept forgetting to buy. Before turning toward the library, she stopped by the lounge. Mateo had drawn a yellow sun as big as a plate. "Mama will be right back," she said. "Stay put. If anyone knocks, don't open. Wait for me." Mateo nodded solemn as a little old man. "I'll wait with the flowers." Elena kissed his forehead, crayon wax and clean child skin blending together. She pulled the door to and faced the hallway with the sign, "Private Library." Her foot felt like it was stepping onto a taut cable stretched between two buildings behind her, the fear of losing her job. Ahead, an unknown with a name that might be opportunity. She carried the tick-tock of the clock and life's warning, "Don't trust a boardroom smile." But she also carried the picture of a red crayon resting in the hand of a man who usually held only silver pens. She stopped at the library door and drew a long breath. Inside might be a cold gust snuffing out the fragile flame that had just flickered, or a single drop of oil to feed it. She lifted her hand and knocked twice light as touching the surface of a night pond. "Come in." Daniel's voice came low, unhurried. Elena opened the door. Warm gold light washed over her, nothing like the corridor's chill. She stepped inside as the door closed behind her, nudging her across a thin border from the part of life she knew how to survive to the part where even hope felt shy. Chapter 2. The Unexpected Proposal. The light inside the Cortez and Asociados library was nothing like the chill of the hallway outside. Low-hanging amber shades pooled a warm glow more home than office, mingling with the scent of oak and old paper. Elena stood still at the door for a moment, hands still trembling after what had just happened in the boardroom. Daniel Cortez sat at a long table, strewn with leather-bound books. Gone was the magazine's still coolness. He leaned back in his chair, tie-loosened weariness flickering in his eyes. He gestured. "Sit." Elena stepped closer, careful the fear of losing her job rising in her throat. She opened her mouth to apologize, but Daniel cut in his voice low. "You think I called you here to fire you?" The question stopped her cold. In the quiet that followed, Daniel drew a breath and began to speak. He told her about his childhood, about a father, a construction worker killed in an electrical accident when Daniel was about Mateo's age. His mother worked herself past exhaustion, and then she too was gone. At 12, relatives took him in, but the price was perfection. No tears, no mistakes, no room for softness. As he spoke, Elena realized it wasn't a CEO's voice trying to control a situation. It was the voice of a boy whose childhood had been taken. The blue eyes that usually looked like ice now trembled as if one light touch might shatter them. Elena swallowed hard. For the first time, she saw Daniel not as a legend of finance, but as a human being. "Tonight," Daniel went on, "when I saw Mateo drawing in the middle of that boardroom, I remembered myself before I was forced to grow up too soon. That child made me feel something I lost long ago." Elena said nothing, her chest filling with equal parts compassion and confusion. Daniel met her eyes. "Elena, you shouldn't be holding a mop. You were a teacher. You know how to care to organize to make this place more than a firm. I want to offer you a different role, coordinator of family programs. Good salary, flexible hours, so you can be with Mateo." The offer stunned her. She didn't know whether to trust it or doubt it. For years, she had known only the world's harsh edge. And now, from the mouth of a man known for his cold precision, came a proposal like light cutting through a seam in the dark. She sat motionless, fingers laced tight, heart shaking and yearning at once. Part of her whispered, "This is just power at play. Don't believe it." Another part pleaded, "Believe it just this once." Daniel leaned forward, his voice dropping so sincere it was hard for Elena to resist. "This isn't pity, it's recognition. I watched you protect your child. Stay calm, take responsibility. That's leadership. I want to give you a chance that matches that worth." In that moment, Elena felt a fragile current of trust kindle between two people, a woman driven to the edge and a man who seemed untouchable, yet carried hidden wounds. She didn't move. The library clock seemed to tick twice as loud, drowning out the sound of her own heart. For years, her single purpose had been to keep Mateo safe-fed in school like any other child. And now, this offer felt like a door to another world, one where she wouldn't have to bow to cold corridors in the middle of the night. "Mr. Cortez?" Elena began softly, but Daniel cut in Daniel. "Call me Daniel." The name felt too near. A thin boundary dissolved in an instant. Elena drew a steadying breath and shook her head slightly. "I don't need anyone's pity. I've heard enough about rich people granting favors then turning lives into games. I won't let Mateo become part of any arrangement." Daniel didn't flinch. No offense touched his face. He braced his hands on the table, voice slow and firm. "This isn't a favor. It's an opportunity. Do you know why I chose you, Elena? Not because of what happened in the boardroom. Because I've seen how you live steadfast, quiet, stronger than any attorney in this building. A person who can shoulder hard work and still raise a kind boy deserves more than what you've been given." Elena lowered her head, fingers twisting until her knuckles blanched. His words grazed the core of her pride. In all these years, no one had acknowledged her effort. No one but Mateo's innocent eyes. "Why me?" she whispered at last. Daniel paused, then answered in a tone that seemed to come from deep within. "Because you remind me of my mother. She gave everything for me until there was nothing left. If someone had offered her a chance, maybe she would have lived longer. I won't repeat that mistake while I'm standing here looking at you and Mateo." The sentence cut straight through to the deepest place in Elena's heart. In his sharp blue eyes, she saw not just a powerful businessman, but an orphaned boy still hungry for the warmth of a family. Silence settled. Only the draft through the door crack and the soft whisper of paper as Daniel slid a slim folder toward her. "This is a draft of the role. Coordinator of family programs." He spoke slowly, each word clear. "It isn't on our official org chart. I want to create it, and I want you to lead it. Double your current pay. Flexible hours. Most important, Mateo will have a place in the firm's childcare center." Elena set her hand on the folder, but didn't open it. The faint warmth of the cover seeped into her cold fingers. Questions crowded her mind. Is this a trap? A test set by the rich? Or is it a real way out? She lifted her gaze steady now. "And in return, what do you want from me?" Daniel hesitated. Then slowly, "Nothing conditional. Only, let me get to know you. Not as an employee, but as a person. It's been a long time since anyone has made me feel real." Elena's heart wavered. She hadn't expected that nearness. For a breath, Miguel, her late husband, flashed in her memory. She clenched her hands, reminding herself not to let her heart lead. Daniel, I need time to think. Her voice shook, but her eyes were firm. Daniel nodded, no pressure in his face. Take your time, but don't let fear steal this chance from you and Mateo. He deserves a real childhood. And you, Elena, you deserve more than long nights in cold hallways. His words echoed in Elena's head as she stepped out of the library. Outside, the clock neared 6. A new day was edging into Madrid. The first light struck the glass panes and spilled onto the marble floor she'd so often scrubbed. But today, her footsteps felt heavier, not from fatigue, but from carrying something new, hope fragile but bright. And in her heart, wary as it was, a small flame began to kindle belief. Chapter 3. From Mop to Manager. That morning, Elena walked into the Human Resources office with trembling hands. The room glowed with early sunlight streaming through white curtains. The air smelled of fresh paper printer ink and coffee scent so foreign to her, a woman used to bleach and damp stone floors. The HR manager handed her a thick envelope. "Congratulations, Ms. Ramirez," he said with a polite smile. Elena sat down, drew a breath, and opened it. Inside lay the official appointment, Coordinator of Family Programs. She read each word slowly, afraid that if she blinked, it might vanish. Double the salary, flexible hours, full benefits. Her vision blurred. Years of scrubbing endless corridors, calloused hands bent over floors. Suddenly all of it seemed to lead here. Elena lifted her head, trying to contain herself, but the corners of her eyes still glistened. "You'll be in charge of programs for employees' children," the manager went on. "Art workshops, reading clubs, small summer camps. It won't be easy, but with your background as a teacher, we believe you'll do well." Elena nodded softly, her heart swelling with pride and fear. For the first time in years, she was no longer the night janitor. She was part of the company, truly part of it. That afternoon, Elena took Mateo to the new childcare center inside the building. The room was wide and bright walls, alive with colorful paintings. Tiny tables and chairs gleamed in cheerful paint. Wooden shelves overflowed with toys. Children's laughter echoed everywhere like a symphony of youth. Mateo stepped inside, eyes wide. He hesitated, gripping his mother's hand. Elena knelt, smoothing his cheek. "Do you want to try playing with the others?" The boy looked around. A small group was building a tower with wooden blocks. A little girl was drawing a rainbow. He paused a moment, then whispered, "Mama, can I bring my crayons?" Elena smiled, pulling the worn crayon box from her bag. "Of course." Mateo hurried to the art table. At first, he sat quietly. Then another boy peeked over. "What are you drawing?" Mateo blushed, but quickly sketched a bright red flower. "For my mom," he murmured. The boy grinned. "I want to draw too. Show me." Within minutes, Mateo was surrounded laughter rippling across the room. From a distance, Elena lifted her hands to her mouth, tears streaming hot and unbidden. For the first time in years, she saw her son as a child, not curled in a staff lounge chair, not waiting through her long night shifts, but playing, belonging, laughing. A teacher came over, smiling gently. "He's quick to join in. Don't worry. Here, he'll have friends. And joy." Elena turned, her voice breaking. "Thank you. Thank you for giving my son a childhood." That night, after Mateo was asleep, Elena sat at her new desk, a small corner in the HR office, yet to her, it felt like a doorway to another life. On it lay a notebook, program folders. and a nameplate, Elena Ramirez, coordinator of family programs. Her fingers brushed the nameplate, a strange rush inside her fear and happiness at once. A dream she had never dared to imagine was now real. And within her, something fragile began to grow. Not just hope, but the belief that life, after so much loss, could still offer her and her boy another chance. Chapter 4: Unspoken Glances. On her first official day with a desk of her own, Elena still felt like a guest who had wandered into the wrong world. The glowing computer screens, the neat rows of binders, the rhythmic clatter of keyboards, so far from the scrape of a mop across marble floors, she once knew by heart. But slowly, she learned to breathe with this new rhythm. She arranged children's activities with careful hands, reading hours, art clubs, plans for a weekend field trip. Small details seemingly ordinary, yet each one tethered her back to the teacher she had once been before life pulled her elsewhere. And it wasn't only her work that was different. Elena began to notice a presence that returned again and again: Daniel Cortez. At first, his visits carried reason. Reviewing the budget for English lessons, signing off on summer camp schedules, clarifying a proposal. But as days passed, he appeared more often, too often for coincidence. And each time Elena felt it, the gaze that lingered longer than necessary, as though he was searching for something beyond paper and numbers. One morning, Elena bent over her desk to straighten a stack of files. When she looked up, Daniel was standing in the doorway, hands loosely clasped behind his back, eyes fixed on her. "Forgive me, am I interrupting?" His voice was low, touched with something that made her heartbeat stumble. Elena shook her head quickly. "No, I was just reordering the schedule for the book club." Daniel stepped in, lifting the page she had just set down. His eyes skimmed a few lines, then paused. "Interesting. You chose Spanish folktales for the first session." "Yes," Elena answered, steadying her tone. "I believe children should start with stories rooted in their own culture before they explore the wider world." Daniel looked up. For a flicker of a moment, his eyes lit, not the cool gaze of a lawyer, but the spark of a man who had stumbled upon a missing piece of himself. A quiet smile touched his lips. "I agree." The moment pressed too close. Elena turned away, her heart racing. She told herself, "Don't misread this. He's your boss. Just being polite." And yet no one else in the firm looked at her that way. His eyes carried warmth and attention, as though between them existed a secret language no one else could hear. In the days that followed, these coincidences multiplied. Elena would cross the hallway and find Daniel at the far end, gaze drawn toward her, even as he spoke with a colleague. As they passed, he offered nothing more than a simple greeting. "Good morning, Elena." Only that. Yet her heart quivered like a string plucked in silence. Another time, Mateo rushed into her office with a new drawing. Daniel happened to be there. Without hesitation, he crouched beside the boy, expensive shirt, brushing the plain office floor. He listened as Mateo described the house with the flower garden, his eyes filled with a tenderness Elena had never seen in him before. Watching them together, Elena felt herself sway. Her reason whispered, "This is dangerous. Two worlds cannot be bridged." But her heart betrayed her, stirring at each glance, each quiet smile. One late afternoon, as Elena left the office, the corridor was nearly empty. Her shadow stretched long beneath the golden lights. Suddenly, footsteps echoed behind her. Daniel drew up alongside her, his stride calm. "Was today difficult?" he asked, voice deep in the quiet. Elena clutched her bag, nodding. "It was fine. I'm adjusting." He looked at her, then gazed silent and steady. For a breath, Elena felt her lungs tighten, and then just a nod. Just one line. "You're doing very well, Elena. Nothing more." He walked on, leaving behind a silence that trembled inside her chest. That night, Elena lay awake, unable to still her mind. Daniel's eyes returned again and again, refusing to fade. She pressed her hand over her heart, feeling its quick rhythm, and wondered, was this the beginning of something real, or only a fragile illusion she must end before it's too late? In the hush of midnight, truth came clear. Her heart had already begun to betray her reason. Chapter 5. The Charity Gala. That night, Cortez and Asociatos shimmered like a palace. Crystal chandeliers spilled starlight across the marble floor, scattering into 1,000 fragments. The air swelled with strings from the orchestra, the clink of crystal glasses, the hum of elegant voices. Elena entered with Mateo, her hand clasping his tightly. Her black dress, plain the only one she owned, apart from her mourning clothes, stood out awkwardly among the blaze of gowns and jewels. Her heart pounded, not from the lights, but from the truth she did not belong here. Mateo, on the other hand, brimmed with delight. In his crisp white shirt and slightly crooked bow tie, he looked every bit a tiny gentleman. His wide eyes sparkled at the sight of tables piled with pastries and glittering glasses. "Mama candy," he whispered, then leaned close. "Can I have just one?" Elena laughed, softly smoothing his hair. "Just one." She tried to steady herself to blend into the glittering crowd, but nothing could erase the fact she was an outsider in this world. A voice cut through the fragile peace, sharp as glass. "Well, what a surprise to see you here." Elena turned. Before her stood a woman in a blazing red gown, diamonds catching fire under the chandeliers. Her blonde hair was twisted in a perfect chignon, every step radiating confidence. Isabella Marquez, Daniel Cortez's official fiancée. "You must be Elena Ramirez." Isabella's voice was sweet, each word a blade. From cleaning staff to guest at a gala like this, quite the modern fairy tale. Heads turned, curious, amused, disdainful. Elena's face flushed. Her grip on Mateo's hand tightened. She longed to disappear into shadow. And then Daniel appeared. Tall, commanding in a black tuxedo, he crossed the room with steady steps. With one glance, he laid his protective hand at Elena's back. His voice rang sharp as steel. "Mateo is my guest, and so is his mother." Isabella faltered, but her smile held. She looped her arm through Daniel's fingers, clinging eyes glittering with possession. "Of course. I was only being polite." Elena lowered her head, her throat tight. Even with Daniel's defense, the truth pressed in. She would never belong here. Unable to bear the stairs, Elena found her way to the balcony. The night air of Madrid bit cold, but at least it let her breathe. Below, the city shimmered like an ocean of stars. Mateo sat curled in a corner, crayons in hand, lost in his drawings. He looked up, his eyes clear. "Mama, are you sad? I don't like the blonde lady." Her eyes looked like a witch's. Elena laughed through her tears. "Mateo, don't say that. But it's true. I think Mr. Daniel doesn't like her either." Before Elena could answer, footsteps sounded behind her. Daniel. His tie loosened his face, softer now, stripped of the icy mask he wore in the ballroom. He sat down beside her tuxedo, and all on the cold stone floor. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "Isabella shouldn't have spoken that way." Elena shook her head, gaze fixed on the glowing city. She was right. "I don't belong here. I'm just a cleaning woman. That's all I'll ever be." Daniel turned his voice deep, his eyes gentler than she had ever seen. "And if I told you, I don't want this world either. That among everyone here, only you make me feel alive." Elena's breath caught. For one fragile moment, rank and reason dissolved under his steady gaze. "Mama, Mr. Daniel, look," Mateo cried, suddenly pointing skyward. Stars, so many, like diamonds. They lifted their eyes. Above them, the night sky over Madrid glittered endless, a sea of lights. Daniel's gaze fell back to Elena, and in a voice nearly lost to the wind, he whispered, "Not as bright as your eyes." The distance between them vanished. Daniel leaned closer, brushing his lips to hers, slow, tentative, a question without words. Elena closed her eyes. Her heart answered for her. When they drew apart breathless, their eyes shone with the knowledge, from this night forward, nothing would ever be the same. Chapter 6. The Necklace in the Locker. The morning after the gala, Elena arrived at the firm with her heart still trembling from the memory of the balcony. Every step across the marble floor seemed to echo with the lingering warmth of that fateful kiss. She tried to hide the shy smile tugging at her lips, afraid of being discovered, yet quietly daring to hope that maybe, just maybe, everything could change. But the dawn of happiness did not last. Darkness came crashing down. As Elena slipped her lunchbox into her locker, in the staff changing room, 2 security guards entered. One tall and thin, his voice clipped and dry. "Ms. Ramirez, we need to check your locker." Elena froze. "Check why?" The other answered curtly, "There's been a report of stolen jewelry from last night's gala. We're just following procedure." Her blood turned cold, but she steadied herself, certain nothing could be found. She pulled open the metal door. It screeched on its hinges, and something fell with a sharp, damning clink. A diamond necklace hit the tile floor, glittering like a death sentence. Elena's breath vanished. No, that's not mine. Someone put it there." Her voice cracked, rising in panic. The guard said nothing, recording with cold precision. One bent down, lifted the necklace high under the fluorescent light. The stones refracted cruelly, throwing sparks across Elena's pale, stricken face. "You'll need to come with us." Half an hour later, Elena sat in the boardroom, the same room where Mateo had drawn flowers just last night. Now she was wedged between guards, a suspect on trial. The air pressed heavy, suffocating. The door opened. Isabella entered first, immaculate in a white suit, her smile triumphant. Behind her came Daniel, his face carved from ice. Elena leapt to her feet. "Daniel, you have to believe me, I didn't take it. Someone planted it in my locker." His blue eyes, usually sharp, unyielding, were clouded with frost. He set the necklace on the table. His voice was low, decisive. "It was found in your locker, and the security footage shows you were the last to leave my office last night." Elena shook her head, violently, tears spilling. "Yes, because you asked me to review the budget files. You know that, Daniel. You know me." I would never steal. You understand me better than that. For a flicker, a single heartbeat, she thought she saw doubt in his eyes. Or was it hope? But Isabella's hand closed over his shoulder, her voice sweet as poison. Daniel, I know this is hard to accept, but desperate people do desperate things. She has a child, no money. Don't let pity cloud your judgment. Don't, Elena cried, broken. Don't you dare drag Matteo into this. My son has nothing to do with it. The room went silent. Elena stepped forward, her eyes drowning in anguish, clinging to Daniel as if to the last fragile thread of trust. Look at me, Daniel. Do you truly believe I could do this? After everything we've shared? Daniel looked away. His silence thundered louder than words. When he finally spoke, his voice was hoarse but distant. I'm sorry, Elena. The evidence is too strong. Her heart shattered. She staggered back, hand over her mouth. The pain was not the trap, not the necklace, it was him. The man she had dared to trust chose fear and reputation over faith in her. Tears blurred her vision as her voice broke. You're a coward, Daniel. You'd rather protect your image than believe in a woman who has nothing but the truth. When the truth comes out, remember this moment, the moment you chose fear over trust. The boardroom door slammed shut behind her, its echo like a verdict. In that instant, Elena knew she had lost everything: her job, her dignity, and worst of all, the fragile faith she had only just begun to feel. Chapter 7. Exile. The winter wind of Madrid howled through the cracks of the old window, carrying a chill that cut to the bone. In the small apartment of a poor neighborhood, Elena sank into a wooden chair, her hands raw and cracked from cleaning chemicals. On the table lay a faded cloth bag with a handful of crumpled bills, the meager reward for another day spent scrubbing dingy office floors. Since leaving Cortez and Asociatos, Elena's life had slid back into the shadows she thought she had escaped. The shining marble hallways were gone. Now, only gray tile floors and the sharp sting of bleach clung to her hair, her fingernails, her very skin. The clock striking 5 in the morning had once again become the anthem of survival. She was no longer the coordinator of family programs. That little nameplate, the one that once brought her tears of joy, was now just a ghost haunting her memory. Matteo sat on the floor, clutching his battered box of crayons like it was treasure. He leaned over a worn notebook coloring with the focus of a boy who carried more hope than the world deserved. His tongue peeked out in concentration as he filled in the lines. Elena bent closer and her heart squeezed. On the page was the figure of a tall man in a suit. His eyes were sad, vast as an ocean. Beside him stood a small boy, holding his hand, smiling brightly. Matteo. Elena whispered, her throat tight. Who are you drawing? The boy looked up, his eyes shining clear as glass. I'm drawing Mr. Daniel. I think he misses us. Mama, he's not bad. He's just sad. Elena's breath caught. She had tried to bury every memory. But Matteo clung to his faith in the man who had turned away from them. Someday, he'll come back to say sorry. Matteo went on, as if sharing a secret. Then we can all be together again, at the children's center. I'll show him this drawing. Elena pulled her son into her arms, tears spilling hot down her face. She wanted to shout, "No, Matteo, the rich never come back. They only protect their own world," but she couldn't break the innocence in those eyes. So instead, she held him tighter and whispered, "My son, if the truth ever returns. I only pray You'll keep that faith inside you." Matteo nodded, then bent back over his notebook, the crayons scratching softly. In that dim apartment, the colors on his page glowed like tiny flames, sparks of belief that even the darkest night couldn't smother. Elena turned away, wiping her tears. Her heart was shattered, yet she knew it was Matteo's fragile faith that kept her from collapsing completely. And somewhere deep in her, a frail voice still whispered, "Maybe. Just maybe. Matteo is right." Chapter 8. The press conference news of the stolen necklace spread like wildfire. The tabloids screamed their headlines. Daniel Cortez's secret lover, a diamond thief, from janitor to criminal, who is Elena Ramirez. While Elena collapsed in her small apartment, clutching Matteo and struggling to hold on to faith on the other side of Madrid, Daniel lived in darkness. He barely slept. Security tapes guard reports. Witness statements, nothing aligned. There were gaps, strange inconsistencies. Cameras that flickered out the very moment Elena walked past, witnesses who all happened to be allies of the Marquez family. Night after night, Daniel locked himself inside the firm's library, replaying every recording, combing through every line. And then he found it. A backup file Isabella hadn't thought to erase. On it, the truth appeared: a familiar figure slipping into the staff changing room just before the necklace was discovered. Isabella. Rage seared through him, but beneath it was shame. He had been manipulated. He had let Elena suffer humiliation for his cowardice. For the first time in his life, Daniel Cortez saw himself as weak, and he decided no more hiding. The International Press Hall of Cortez and Asociados blazed with lights. Dozens of cameras aimed at the podium, the company's logo shining bold against a navy backdrop. Journalists jostled forward, microphones raised, notebooks ready, eager for scandal. Isabella swept in first, radiant in white silk, her lips crimson, her smile poised for glory. Her father, Don Marquez, followed close, his aging face strained, but still cloaked in power. Then Daniel appeared, not with his usual polished calm, but with the shadows of sleepless nights under his eyes. He wore a simple black suit, tie loosened, gaze sharp as steel. The room hushed instantly. "Thank you for coming." His voice filled the microphone, low and steady. "Today, I am not here to speak of mergers or contracts. Today, I am here to speak of the truth." The hall erupted in whispers. Camera shutters clattered. Daniel drew a deep breath, then fixed his eyes on the crowd. Last week, one of our employees, Ms. Elena Ramirez, was accused of theft. The press defamed her, and shamefully I believed the lie. Gasps rippled through the room. Reporters scribbled furiously, microphones surged forward. But the truth is, this Elena is innocent. She was framed. And the one behind it all is Isabella Marquez. The room exploded like a bomb. Voices shouting, cameras whipping to capture Isabella's frozen face. Her smile faltered, but she lifted her chin. "Daniel, what nonsense is this? You would slander me before the world." Daniel did not look at her. He raised his hand. Behind him, the screen lit up. The security footage rolled, Isabella slipping into the locker room, placing a small box inside a locker. Elena's locker. Chaos thundered. Journalists rose to their feet, cameras zooming in on Isabella's paling face. Her father surged forward, voice shaking. "This is fabricated, impossible." Daniel's reply was ice. "Fabricated. I had digital forensic experts verify it. The original file is secured on an independent system. This is irrefutable." He paused, then spoke again, voice cutting through the uproar. "For years, the Marquez family has sought to control me through engagement, through financial leverage. But today, here and now, I declare Cortez and Asociados severs all ties with the Marquez family, and my engagement to Isabella is annulled." The hall exploded again. "Mr. Cortez, did you just... You're calling off the wedding. What will this mean for the European market?" Daniel lifted his head, voice rising above the chaos. "There are things greater than contracts, greater than shares, greater than ambition. They are justice and truth. And I will not allow an innocent woman to be destroyed for the sake of power." Isabella's composure cracked her voice, trembling. "Daniel, you'll pay for this. You cannot defy my family." He turned to her gaze glacial. "No, Isabella. It is you who will pay before the law." He gestured. Two plainclothes officers stepped forward, moving toward Isabella. The room fell breathless. Cameras flashed as the once proud heiress paled her hands, shaking the necklace that had framed another woman, now glittering like chains. The press roared shouts, cheers, disbelief. But Daniel's final words silenced all. "Justice is late, but it comes." And Elena Ramirez stands as proof of that. The conference ended in chaos. Within hours, social media erupted. Justice for Elena trended worldwide. News outlets from Madrid to New York, London, to Buenos Aires broadcast the video, calling it the broken engagement of the century. In her tiny apartment, Elena sat before her flickering television. When Daniel's voice filled the screen, "Elena Ramirez is innocent." She covered her mouth, tears spilling freely. Mateo's eyes glowed. "See, Mama, I told you. He's not bad. He's just sad." Elena pulled her son close, laughing through her tears. For the first time in weeks, the weight of humiliation lifted. Justice had spoken not only for her, but for the child's unshakable faith. That night, when the press hall stood empty, Daniel remained on the stage. The lights dimmed, leaving him alone beneath the company's crest. The engagement shattered, the Marquez grip broken. But the price was solitude. He knew the hardest battle still lay ahead, convincing Elena that this time he would not fail her. In his hand, he still held a small red crayon, Mateo's gift. A reminder that amidst all the games of power, it was a child who had taught him what truth meant. And he whispered a vow to himself, "This time, I won't lose them again." Chapter 9. A knock at the door. The night in Madrid was cold. In the small apartment of the poor district, Elena had just tucked Mateo into bed. The boy curled beneath a thin blanket, clutching his worn box of crayons as if it were treasure. Elena brushed her hand over his soft hair, her heart swelling with fragile comfort. At least justice had been spoken, but her heart still bled. Yes, Daniel had stood before the world and defended her, but the memory of him turning away when she needed him most still cut like an unhealed wound. Then 3 knocks. Firm, unmistakable. Elena froze. Her pulse thundered. At this hour, who could it be? She crept to the door, pressed her eye to the crack, and her heart stopped. Daniel Cortez, not in a sharp suit, but in a plain white shirt sleeves rolled high, worn jeans. His eyes were hollow from sleepless nights. His hair disheveled, his face marked with regret. No longer the powerful lawyer Madrid admired, just a man burdened by guilt. Elena hesitated. Part of her wanted to slam the door to forget. Another part longed to open it. Her trembling hand chose for her. The lock clicked. The door opened. Daniel stood still, not entering. He bowed his head, his voice rough. "Elena, may I come in?" She said nothing, only stepped aside. Daniel entered the cramped room. His eyes swept over the cracked walls, the battered table, and Matteo asleep in the corner. The silence pressed down, broken only by the ticking clock. Elena folded her arms, holding herself together. "Why are you here? Daniel, justice has been served. My name has been cleared." "What else is there to say?" Daniel turned. His blue eyes shimmered with unshed tears. And then, without warning, he dropped to his knees before her. "Elena, I came to apologize for doubting you, for choosing fear instead of faith, for leaving you and Matteo to suffer alone. That is my sin, and I will carry it forever unless you allow me the chance to make it right." Elena stood stunned. Here was the man once feared across European courtrooms, now kneeling on her cracked tile floor. Tears filled her eyes, but she clenched her fists, forcing strength into her voice. "Daniel, you hurt me. When the whole world turned against me, I needed just one person. And you turned away. Do you understand? I lost my trust in you." Daniel bowed, lower his voice, breaking, "I understand. I don't ask for instant forgiveness, only for a chance to prove that I will never abandon you again." His hands trembled as he pulled a small velvet box from his pocket. He opened it. Inside lay a simple gold ring, set with a deep green emerald, glowing softly under the dim light. "This was my mother's ring," Daniel whispered. "She kept it until her last breath, saying it was only for true love. I could never give it to anyone else. Elena Ramirez, will you give me the chance to love you the way you deserve?" Elena gasped, tears falling freely. Every wound, every bitterness seemed to soften at the sight of this man on his knees, holding the only treasure his mother had left. From the corner, Matteo stirred, rubbing his eyes. "Mama, who's at the door?" He blinked, then brightened. Mr. Daniel. His gaze fell on the scene before him, his face lighting with joy. "You came to say sorry to Mama, didn't you? I knew it." Elena covered her face, sobbing. Daniel lifted his eyes, red but resolute. At last, Elena nodded faintly, whispering, "All right, but only on one condition. We walk as equals, no one saving the other. Just two people holding hands through the storm." Daniel gripped her hands, his voice firm as steel equals. "In everything, I promise." Matteo clapped, running into their arms. And in that moment, the little apartment filled with warmth, not the kind bought by wealth, but the kind only a true family can hold. Chapter 10. Horizonte dawn broke golden over the outskirts of Madrid. A small house with a garden glistening in the morning dew. This was where Elena, Daniel, and Matteo had begun their new life. Not a mansion, just a humble tiled roof home. But inside, laughter rang like a song of freedom. Daniel wore an apron, awkwardly watering rows of roses. Elena stood at the doorway, coffee in hand, laughing at the sight of a man once feared across Europe, now fumbling with a watering can. Matteo darted through the garden, shouting, "Daddy Daniel, hurry, the flowers are thirsty." One simple word, Daddy and Daniel's heart stilled. He lifted his gaze. Elena's gentle nod was the silent recognition he had longed for. Opening day. The building shone in warm yellow paint beneath the sun. Above the gate, a new sign gleamed, Horizonte Learning Center Horizon. Elena, dressed in a simple but elegant suit, stood before rows of parents and children. Her heart swelled. She was no longer the woman who scrubbed marble halls in silence, no longer the victim of lies. Today, she was the founding director of Horizonte, a place where the children of working families could learn play and find hope. Daniel stood at her side, not as a powerful benefactor, but as a partner. When Elena's trembling voice cut the ribbon, he saw in her eyes a strength, reborn, the strength of a woman who had walked through shadows and chosen to build light for others. Matteo skipped in the courtyard, holding up his newest drawing. "This is my family." It hung in the entrance hall. In the picture, Elena wore a suit and held books. Daniel in rolled-up sleeves planting in the garden, and Matteo with his backpack smiling wide. Above them, in crayon letters, "Our working family." When Elena saw it, she broke into tears, hugging her son tight. Daniel wrapped his arms around them, both whispering, This is the most beautiful portrait of my life." That night, the three of them sat on the porch bench, looking up at Madrid's starry sky. The same stars that had once witnessed a stolen kiss on a balcony. But now nothing was hidden, nothing trembling. Elena Daniel said softly, squeezing her hand, "I once thought my world was built on contracts and power, but it was only a gilded cage. You and Matteo, you are my true freedom." Elena leaned into him, her smile brimming with peace. "And you've shown me that love doesn't save, it heals. Not above each other, but beside each other." Matteo nestled between them, pointing upward. "Mama, Daddy, Daniel, look. The stars are brighter tonight." They both looked up, then at each other, smiling. No more words were needed. They knew. Their lives had opened to a new horizon, where pain was no longer prison, but foundation for joy. Later, the little garden bathed in silver moonlight. On the old stone bench, Elena rested her head on Daniel's shoulder. The hum of crickets, the scent of roses carried by the night breeze. For the first time in years, her heart was at peace. Daniel's arm wrapped around her, his gaze fixed on the stars above. Thousands of them burned, bright witnesses to pain, betrayal, forgiveness, and love. "Elena," she whispered, her voice trembling yet warm. "If Matteo hadn't wandered into that boardroom that night, would we have ever met?" Daniel looked down, meeting her luminous eyes. He held her hand tighter, his smile quiet, steady. "I believe I still would have found you. From the very first moment, you were the one I was searching for." They fell into silence, their breaths mingling. In that stillness, Elena understood true love was not rescue, but healing together. And dignity, the one thing she had never surrendered, was the jewel that led her here. From inside, Matteo ran out clutching his working family drawing. He lifted it high under the starlight. "Mama, Daddy, Daniel, this is our family forever." Elena laughed through her tears. Daniel knelt, pulling them both into his arms. Above them, Madrid's stars shone brighter than ever, declaring the truth of their story. True love heals, and dignity is priceless. Leave a comment with your city and rate this story from 0 to 10. Subscribe for more CEO stories of love and healing.